Good to see everyone. Thanks for coming out tonight. So, we are excited tonight. Our event, we're going to talk a little bit about SE career paths. Just by a show of hands, I'd love to always start this out. Who is it your first time at a SENY event? Wow. Yeah. That looks like about 80% of the room. So, I'm not sure what that's saying about our past events, but this one's going to be awesome. We're going to talk about our career paths, a lot of different ways coming in and out of the SE profession. So we'll jump in. So welcome, thank you for coming. My name is Eric Glick. By day, I lead the solutions engineering team at a company called Coda. Shout out, we're hiring, so for anyone looking, definitely using this as a recruiting tool. But we also have 4 amazing guests that we're going to hear from tonight about their journey into sales engineering. So this is our second event of 2020, and here's our agenda for tonight. So we had some light food, a couple cocktails, and there will be more after this, but we'll get into just the panel. So we have some great guests that we're going to hear about, and then we'll close out with some networking, food, and of course more drinks. First, I have to say, I think everyone probably said it when they came into this office, but they were like, damn, this place is nice. So thank you so much to Yext, but more specifically, thank you so much to Lizzie. She pretty much single-handedly organized an incredible event. I would have to say probably our best one yet, so thank you so much, Lizzie. We'll definitely be coming back, hopefully, so please behave yourselves tonight. We don't want to, make a scene here. Also, thanks to Lexi, who has been such a great supporter of SENY. So this is where you can find us. If it's your first time, you can find us on Meetup. That's where you can see our events and what's going on and sign up. Our Slack is where you can interact and meet people. We have a great networking channel there, so if you join that, you'll get paired up randomly with people so that you can meet them. And then our LinkedIn is where you can follow us to figure out what's going on. And excited to announce, we actually just hit 1,000 members on Meetup. And it's been crazy to see over the last 4 years, but it's awesome. It's all about the people. And so what we want to do is, one of my favorite parts, highlight a couple of the amazing people who make this possible. So first up, we're going to do a new member spotlight. She's sitting in the front row. Let's give her, let's stand up. Let's give a little, hey, how you doing? Miss Sarah Newman, she is an SE leader at Slack. She actually started her career as really a non-technical, so from more of the project management side. She does amazing work leading the women's ERG over at Slack. So if you're interested in starting an ERG at your company, definitely Sarah's a great resource for that. And I'm sure she's hiring or knows someone who is at Slack. So definitely seek her out during drinks after this. But all around great person, and thanks for coming, Sarah.
Thanks. Yeah.
One more. We have Mr. Akash. Is Mr. Akash in the house, or is he still drinking? Oh, no. Mr. Akash. So exciting news for Akash. He actually started at AWS as an associate SE straight out of college. He's going to be one of the founding SEs at a company called Rudder, which is basically, as I understand it, the next Twilio. So super excited for him to start his career there. He helps us record some of our events. He's also an aspiring TikTok influencer. Is that true? Maybe. So we'll look out for some content for you, but definitely reach out, say hello to Akash. I'm sure the Rudder team will be hiring, so a great person to know. So with that, we're going to get into the panel tonight. We have 4 amazing people who are going to be up here, so I'd like to welcome them all to the stage.
Yeah. Hey, tell them that we got some Slack for them.
Should we sit in front of our... Go ahead.
Yeah, please sit in front of your pictures. We also have some swag for you, apparently. Thank you, Akshat.
Great mugs, great mugs.
Great mugs. Is there anything else, or is it just...
It holds hot coffee, cold coffee.
Whiskey.
Whiskey, yeah. Those days you need them.
Great, thank you for describing the use cases for a mug. We definitely have some SEs in the audience for sure. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have everyone here, and it's a great turnout, and I'm even more excited to get to know our panelists as well. So we're gonna go ahead and start out with a round of introductions. My name is Lizzie. I'm an SE at Yext, and I'll be moderating the panel today. Let's go ahead and do just name, role, and a brief headline of what you do in your role for those who might not be familiar. We'll start with you, Sarah.
Sure. Hey everybody, I'm Sarah Doherty. I'm a sales engineer on the team here at Yext. I've been here for almost 2 years and I've had 4 jobs, so I'm right on track for another switch up. So I might be talking about the career path out of this role sooner rather than later, but pleasure to meet all of you.
Hello everybody, my name is Alex King. I am a lead value consultant at Slack. Been at Slack for about 4.5 years. Shout out to the Slack folks up front here. They're going to be making weird faces at me all night, so I guarantee you I might laugh up here. Value consulting essentially is the function that helps a customer in pre-sale understand what the return on investment is for whatever the investment, whatever product they may be making is. Fun fact, I started as an SE, so I feel amongst family tonight.
Woo! Woo! And I'm Ken Kreitzer. I'm an account executive at Amazon Web Services. Been there about 3 years. I was an SE for 9 years earlier in my career, which is why I'm up here on the panel. And yeah, my role, I'm the sales guy. I am the quarterback for a large extended team, a couple of dozen people, and I handle just one customer. So it's a very interesting role.
Thanks, team. All right, we're gonna warm up with a round of speed questions, which you haven't had access to, so you're really on the hot seat now. So we're gonna start with, what is a nickname you've had at some point in your life? What is your favorite bagel or pizza place in New York? And who is a celebrity who you'd freak out to see on the subway? If you can remember them, otherwise I'll remind you. We'll start with Ken on the other side.
All right, well, in college, I was an electrical engineering major, but I was also very active in musical theater. And all my theater friends called me Kengineer. So that's the nickname that stuck for decades. Let's see, favorite bagel or pizza place. I live in New Jersey. I'm not in New York that much, so I'm gonna go, thank you. I'm gonna go with Forte Pizzeria in Randolph, New Jersey, which is where I live. And I've forgotten the last one, Lizzie, give me a...
The last one is a celebrity or person you'd freak out if you saw them on the subway.
Well, I was very sad to hear about William Hurt, because he actually went to Tufts, and I would have been thrilled to meet him.
Awesome, on to you, Alex.
Sure. People usually just call me by my last name, King. It's easy. Bagel or pizza place. This is a question that might start a war, depending on who you ask. Old Bagel Shop on Vanderbilt in Brooklyn is awesome. And then celebrity on the subway. I saw LeBron James ride the subway one time. This is a video. So if I saw him on the subway and like a team on the subway, that would be cool.
Well, my mom has called me Bear since I was little, because like Sarah Bear, so it kind of rhymes. It was, you know, in the name. But it fits my personality. I can be a little bit ferocious, a little bit loving, so it works. I'm not that snobby when it comes to pizza and bagels, so usually whatever $1 slice is closest when I need it most is my favorite at that night. And then if I saw Kate Middleton, I think I would pass out. She was in my dream the other night, so I'm manifesting really hard.
I'll send you that energy as well, Sarah. So we'll start a really question of what brought you into SEing, and we'll start with you, Alex.
Sure. So I think most people know this isn't a job that you kind of point out in college and say, I want to be an SE. I found my way into SEing from a friend of mine. I have had a kind of winding career. I started off in the music industry. Then that was at the time that music was trying to kind of figure itself out with downloads and all of that sort of thing. So ended up doing a total 180 and going into pharmaceutical advertising. And then, 3.5 years later, ultimately found myself kind of interviewing for a role at Oracle for an SE team that they were starting. I think the theme, though, being just customer engagement, being in front of folks, and being able to kind of distill a value proposition for whatever it is you're doing down into something that that person can understand. So that's kind of what transitioned me from that pharmaceutical advertising role into a more technical solutions engineering role.
All right, dealer's choice, Sarah or Ken?
Ken,
Go ahead,
first.
Ken.
Okay. So I started my career right out of school as a consultant, which I did for about 6 years. And I enjoyed doing it, but I was really more interested in getting involved in the business side and not just doing programming all the time. My older brother had followed a similar career path and went from being an in-house consultant to an SE. And I got my mind latched on it, and I just ferociously went after an SE job with, at the time, a database company, which is where I had some expertise, and I landed it. The rest was history.
SE was definitely not an obvious path for me. I studied history in undergrad, and then I sort of followed the very well-paved road out of my college into working at an investment bank. I wasn't a banker. I worked on a trading floor, so a little bit more Wolf of Wall Street, but also not at all like that than like some of the banking jobs that some of your friends may have had. But I was doing that for a few years, and I was pretty miserable. Just the lifestyle was really hard. My husband's in the Army, and being chained to a desk in Midtown Manhattan definitely didn't make my family life any easier. But there was a lot that I liked about my job. In finance, you're always supposed to be learning. Every day you're reading all the time, and you're learning, and you're taking in all these inputs, and you're trying to figure out how to translate and effectively communicate those to the right audience. So I knew that was going to be really important to me in my next job, and that's where sales engineering has really filled a nice place for me, and the lifestyle is much better. So good move there.
So Sarah took a path to SE where you started somewhere and then you landed in SE, and then with our other two panelists, y'all started with SE and moved elsewhere. And so slightly more difficult question, I'm wondering what brought you out of SE, and now that you've been out of it for a while, what, if anything, do you miss about the role?
Sure, I'll go first. And I actually started as a consultant, so I moved into SE and then I moved out of SE. But I found after being an SE for 9 years, I just found myself more and more intrigued by the business side and seeing what the account executives were doing. I didn't have false illusions that I could do what they're doing and make more money. I knew it was a very different role, but I was attracted to it, and I felt like I had a good set of support system and mentors to help me through it. And the other thing that factored in my decision was, at that time in my life, my wife had our first baby, and she was starting to step away from work. And we decided that I really needed to figure out a way to make more money, and it seemed like SE and then sales were going to be a good path to do that.
Sure, for me, it was really kind of opportunity meets something that I was interested in. So I started as an SE at Slack when we were probably 15 SEs in the organization. Eric and I were like number 3 and 4 in New York. And the SE organization was incredibly technical at that point in time, and that was not necessarily my background. But what I did have was a really good value selling basis coming from Oracle. So as we were kind of maturing as an SE organization, one of the things that I started to focus in on was leaning in on my strengths, and my strength was value selling. So I started to show up as a value consultant in a lot of my deals as an SE before kind of taking this role. And then, wouldn't you have it, look, kind of is preparation and timing happening together. And, I kind of put my hand up at Slack to say, I think it's a good time to maybe take a step in this direction more officially and become a value consultant. So really, it was just leaning into some of the strengths that I had and kind of finding out what my differentiator was and bringing that to the organization.
Absolutely, and for Sarah, what was that transition like for you? From your previous role, what were you able to leverage having been in finance and banking and bring that into an SE space, and also your upward rotations too?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I was drawn to the fact that SE has a lot of learning and a lot of distilling information, translating it, and communicating it. I also mentioned before, I've had a few jobs at Yext. So when I first came here, I was part of a rotational program where I got to spend a few 6-month stints, first on implementation and then on revenue strategy, and then I was working for our CEO for a little bit, and then I was with SE. And I think as I was sort of taking that tour around the tech business, I realized that I really loved working with clients. I mean, at a technology company, right? If we can create the most incredible widgets, but if we're not connecting with customers, we can't make customers care about it, we really don't have a company, or at least we don't have revenue, and that's kind of important for the other parts. So I love talking to the customers, but I think the biggest thing that I really learned from my finance experience was a lot of like thinking on my feet and then like that translation part.
Absolutely, that's definitely a core part of our day-to-day lives here, and we'll be asking about a big demo fail later, so when thinking on your feet definitely doesn't work, which has happened to all of us in this room. And so for Alex and Ken, having been in a different role and had the experience of being in an SE role before this, for those SEs who might be in the audience who are thinking about what's next, what do you think you were able to leverage from your SE experience that you use in your day-to-day role now?
I can start. I think a really deep product understanding is invaluable to, you know, the kind of intangible parts of my role, right? So a lot of times I'll get in a little bit later in a sales cycle with customers, and maybe some of the value drivers haven't totally been built out or totally understood by the account team to point. And having that SE background allows me to go in and kind of see what's happening within the sales cycle and say, okay, I can see this from a product perspective. I understand what we're trying to solve for, and let me target my questions that are more value consulting or value specific around KPIs or things that we want to measure to some of the things that I know our product can do, right? And thus expand the aperture that way, which ultimately helps us not have to go back and repeat steps sometimes in sales cycles, which I think is really helpful for our account executives, because you all know if you are an SE, they just want to go, go, go. So being able to kind of tie that SE experience and product knowledge and product understanding in really helps me kind of ask the right questions to expand the aperture for customers and for our account teams.
Yeah, so I think there are a lot of similarities in my answer. You know, especially early in my career, since I moved into sales, there were a lot of salespeople who were more focused on building the relationship and going out to dinner and telling the jokes to make people laugh. And I came into the role with a very consultative approach. I had been an SE, I had been a consultant, so I was immediately focused on figuring out what is the value we can bring to the customer. And so that served me well throughout my sales career. But I think the other thing is really having, even though I'm not close to the technology anymore, over the years I've stepped further and further away, I understand the concepts. So people can't pull things over on me. Every now and then something will be explained and I'll say that doesn't sound right, and I'll start peeling back the onion and asking questions, and I think people are shocked about the questions I'm asking and the level of understanding that I have at an architectural level. So those skills from the SCE days really have come in handy.
So Ken and Alex both mentioned ways in which you were able to grow in your career as an SE, either being close to the product, having a customer relationship. And so for Sarah, I'm wondering what your experience has been so far. In what ways have you felt challenged and encouraged to grow in an SE role? And then in what ways do you feel like there's potential limits to growth in the role that you've seen so far?
So, like I said, I don't come from a technical background, and I think that's been my biggest area of growth and also my biggest insecurity, I think, while like working with customers, especially when you're talking to people from the IT department, and I feel a little bit like a cardboard cutout, just kind of like reciting like the things that I know about the product, but please don't ask me any questions about like this coding language or how you actually do it, you know. So I'm working on that because I would like to feel a little bit more confident, like no matter who I'm talking to. So that's one area of growth. And then I think something that, this isn't exactly the question you asked, but I think something that I wish SEs were leveraged for more is, and this might be kind of controversial, but I think we are a relationship building asset that aren't always utilized. You know, it's not just like the account executive should be the only person who's trying to make those personal connections with the customers. And frankly, especially when you're talking to more technical audiences, we're gonna have a lot more in common, you know, and like a lot more that we can bond over, or maybe that they'll trust us over. So I think I always love when account executives really try and empower me to be part of that relationship building team. So whether that's, I had a one-on-one meeting with the technical day-to-day contact on Monday, which isn't really inside of our scope of how we do things here at Yext. Like usually you're not supposed to talk to a client without an account executive, just because that could get out of hand, obviously really quickly. But for this account in this RFP, it was the exact right next move for me to get to really bond with this person and have a kind of casual, no salesperson in the room chat about why our technology could make her life better. And it went really well, so hopefully we win the RFP. But just more stuff like that I think could be really beneficial.
Yes, fingers crossed for you, Sarah. Manifesting that and you meeting Kate Middleton with equal force.
From your lips to God's ears.
So you've been given so much growth, so much preparation, being a great SE, which all of you definitely are and were. We've all had that moment where we get on a call and absolutely crash and burn. And so I would love to hear from y'all. So much of being an SE is knowing when to improve, when to stop, and when to iterate, thinking on your feet, shifting under a moving foundation. And so Alex was telling us the other day a story of a demo fail, and I'd love for all three of you to share one and how you recovered from it or what you learned from it.
Yeah, sure. So back in the time machine, back when we went to conferences, Slack had our user conference Frontiers 2019, I believe, and I was tasked with giving a demo on stage in front of an audience maybe 8 times this size, which was scary. We had rehearsed it, everything was set up, we'd been on stage. I got up there and was kind of going through about a third of the way through, and one of my triggers didn't fire on stage. I'm kind of sitting up there like deer in headlights, like, oh shit, this isn't great. And really just kind of made a quick joke about, the kind of in line with the story of somebody going out to get coffee and then kind of reset the trigger, and everything ran really smoothly after that, and ultimately finished the demo. In that moment, my heart dropped. I was really scared. But I think the maybe story here is just leaning into who you are, leaning into your strengths. I found it as a good opportunity to make a joke, and I think the audience was really receptive of understanding that things will go wrong sometimes. And yeah, just things will go wrong, but be resilient, lean into who you are, explain something's gone wrong, and move on.
For me, when I first started at Yext, I learned that a lot of companies have very similar names, but they're not in fact the same company. So I probably spent like 30 minutes prepping a really gorgeous demo for the company I thought I was talking to, and then I get on the call and I go to share my screen to the homepage of that company, and it's not them. It wasn't revealed until that moment, and I don't know. I obviously could have done more to confirm with the seller, or maybe a helpful logo slide at the beginning of their presentation would have cued me in that the colors were off, but we made a little bit of joke about it, and then we navigated to their page, and what was supposed to just be let me imagine I'm walking through your website and I'm trying to find this piece of information. It became a real life thing of me being on their website for the first time, and would I find it over here? No. So it lended some authenticity to my brand new customers stumbling around your website because I was that customer, but definitely taught me a lot about some preparation steps that I don't skip anymore.
Well, I'm really going to turn back the time machine because I was an SE more than 15 years ago. But in the early 2000s, I worked for a company called Broadvision. It was internet applications, personalization. And as an SE, I was carrying around a Unix laptop with my web server and application server, and then a Windows laptop, so I had a web browser so I could show the demo. And it was very complex to set it all up and get everything working properly. So I was at my office in Manhattan, I got everything running, and I decided I'd be really smart and set up the Unix laptop so I could shut it, but it wouldn't go to sleep. It would be all ready when I got there. Put it down in my rolling bag and rolled through the city. You know what happened next. I got there, opened it up, and it had rebooted and everything was gone. Fortunately, I was able to pull it back up. It took me about 20 minutes, and the account executive did some tap dancing for me. It all worked out fine, but I never made that mistake again.
That's for sure. Oh my gosh, I'm glad that I don't have to deal with the same technological challenges. You watched so we could run, thank you.
We didn't have DMs back in my day.
Awesome, well now that we've humbled ourselves a little bit, I'd love if you could tell me, I'm sure that there's a lot of folks in the audience who are possibly interested in moving into SEing, and I know when I was first thinking about it, something that I was wondering is, what makes a successful SE? What does it mean for me to be good at this job beyond numbers, beyond being respected by a team? So I'd love if y'all could talk a little bit about someone who you know or someone who you've worked with before who is a really impressive SE in your eyes and what makes them great at their job.
I can take that one, and actually I've latched on to something Sarah said just about how at Yext it's kind of taboo for the SE to meet directly with the client, and in my experience that is very much promoted. So one of the best SEs I've ever worked with in my life was actually at a company called ArcSite, and we were famous for, we had a great product, and we would do a proof of concept that was a week long. So we would parachute our SE in, and they would spend a week there, they'd have dinner with the clients, and they would not leave until everything worked and everybody at the client understood how it worked, and we had built out custom things for them. And my SE, Paul Bowen, was just amazing technically, knew how to set it up for success and to execute, but he was also just so darn likable. And he would take these people out to dinner and really build the relationships. By the end of the week, they were fast friends, and they were planning to get together later on. They were all connected on LinkedIn. And really that partnership of the salesperson building certain relationships and the SE owning other relationships, and then meeting and coordinating on how you, not leverage, but how you use those relationships to bring more value to the customer and to bring more success to your sales campaign. I think that's the killer combination.
Sure. I think one of the things that makes a really good SE is listening and asking, the question, one question further, or one question deeper each time. An SE that onboarded me at Slack, her name is Marina. This was kind of her thing, and she was really empathetic as well. So she would just have this way of kind of disarming the customer really quickly and helping them to understand that she was on their side, but at the same time really pressing and pushing the customer for more and to think about things differently and to kind of broaden their perspective a little bit as well. And she did this in asking questions. And I think what that got her is a really good understanding of what this customer needed, but then also forced that customer to start considering their unconsidered needs, which then I think expands everything, relationships, expands the opportunity that you may have, from an ACV or financial standpoint, and really helps the overall deal. So I think listening and the empathy to continue to listen, if I sum it up.
I think that your internal credibility is really important, because your customers meet you for the first time, or when they meet you for the first time, they have no idea how smart you are. They're going to give you the benefit of the doubt, but if it becomes clear that your account executive doesn't really trust you, or like there's some other things kind of going on, that credibility will run down really quickly. And there's one SE in particular named Carly Guidici, who's the head of our solutions architecture team here at Yext, who has just done an incredible job of building up her internal credibility. She started on an implementation team and really worked her way up through being an SE to a manager and now running her own department. But between her deep product knowledge and her institutional knowledge, she'll always know the right person to ask that next question. She's just an asset, and because of that, she's asked to be on more deals than anyone else that I know. So I think if you're able to really establish your internal reputation as someone who's going to work hard and knows their stuff, that's going to just open more opportunities for you, and your customers are going to pick up on that as well.
Absolutely, that's something I've definitely seen for Carly as well. And so for those in the audience who, after seeing the good, the bad, and the ugly of being an SE, learning a little bit more about what it takes, building internal credibility and connecting with the customer, knowing the product, what advice do you have for people who are interested in taking the next step to being an SE? Where would you start?
I can start this one because it's related to what I admire about Carly. It's that credibility piece, and like I said, I'm almost never the most technical person when I'm in a room full of SEs, so I don't necessarily mean credentials of having an electrical engineering degree, that's great, Ken, I'm very proud of you. But are you someone who works hard? Are you someone who does the things that they say they're going to do? Are you going out of your way to introduce yourself to other colleagues, whether they're in sales or sales ops or product? Are you someone that people trust your instincts and know that they can count on? Because I think a lot of becoming an SE is it's going to be increasingly difficult at bats, right? First you join an organization and you're doing training, and then maybe you're doing some demos or mock calls internally, and then you'll graduate to an underhand pitch with a customer that it's okay if we lose, and then eventually, you're stepping up to bigger and bigger opportunities. And I think that process will happen faster if people see that you're really earnest and if they trust you.
Yeah, I think leaning into your strengths. I know SEs kind of tend to take two flavors depending on where you are and who you talk to, right? There's a business-minded SE and then you have your more technical-minded SE. I've always found success leaning into what I'm good at, and I think as an SE, there are so many facets to this role that it allows you to lean into something, right? If you find something that you're really interested in technically and you're willing to go down that rabbit hole, I think that's okay as an SE because that then creates value for your organization. That then creates value for you in the role. If you're like me and you get in and somebody's like, look at this SAML log, and I'm like, what the hell is a SAML log? Leaning into that business end of, kind of thinking about, all right, how does my product apply to this customer's business problem? And asking those questions, right? Just leaning into your strengths and really kind of showing up authentically as to, what you're good at and, where you can develop, knowing that and kind of taking those steps accordingly, I think is important.
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of things. I think the authenticity is so key. I also think what I saw with myself as I moved from consulting into SE and then into sales, and I've seen other people as well, is this little bit of struggle on, well, I don't want to be a salesperson and tell things that aren't true. And I think there is this gray area about having to tell every truth that you know, every word about a product, and weighing that against, in the overall scheme of things, will this product deliver value to the customer despite some of those deficiencies? And I think that's an important skill to focus in on and lean into and just get comfortable with, that there's a difference between telling a lie and promoting the benefits and not highlighting all of the negatives that maybe aren't as important as in the context of the benefits.
And for those of us who are in the sales engineering role and are thinking about what's next or what's my horizon from here, for Alex and Ken, what would you start thinking about, or what would be your next step for evaluating what's next?
Sure, I'll take it. I kind of mentioned it earlier that I didn't have illusions when I moved into sales that, I could do what that salesperson is doing. I think a lot of people feel that, but I would say it's important when you're making the move that you're not running away from being an SE because you're tired of doing demos or POCs, but that you're more drawn towards the excitement of the new role. And in the case of SE to sales, which is a pretty big change in day-to-day activities, I would really encourage you to find mentors that you can lean on to talk about the transition and to support you through it. And even more so, making sure that you have a manager who's going to support the transition. I think making a transition like that at a company you've been at where you have a strong reputation and supporters is going to be a much better chance for success than trying to land a sales job or a different job outside of the SE role at a different company where you have so many things to prove already.
Yeah, that's awesome. Not too much I think definitely double-clicking on the mentors piece, definitely double-clicking on the supportive manager piece, and kind of finding the right audience internally to start having those conversations. I'm actually having this conversation with somebody who's in sales right now and thinking about moving over to value consulting. And it's really just kind of helping them to understand the role and helping them to kind of lean in on the things that they're really interested in. So I really like his approach because he's going about it in the right way, right? He's getting to the point that he needs to in his current role, but he's really excited about what's happening in this new role or in this new opportunity, and then engaging us early to have those conversations. So I'd say that, and then the other thing is, once an SE, always an SE. Maybe to the question earlier, right? I think that this role is awesome. I'm so blessed to have found it, and I carry a lot of that stuff, a lot of the things, the skills that I've learned in this role with me, and apply them to my day-to-day, and will continue to apply them in my day-to-day in the future. So that said, to your point, right, you're not running away from SE, you're taking SE and applying it to something new.
I'd actually like to jump on a little more because I think it's an important topic, and the person with the most gray hair up here, I think, have a few more things to share. But for me, moving into sales, I've had a very successful sales career and a sales management career, but it's never been a comfortable zone for me. I've ground my way through it, and I've done all the things I needed to do. I can take people out to dinner, but I'm one of those people, if you take a personality test, I'm an introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert. I can go either way, but when I come home from a client dinner, I'm exhausted. I go to a party with my wife and she comes home and she's ready to go dancing for overnight. So anyway, what I would encourage everybody to do is, I spent a lot of my career chasing stock options and money and more increasingly responsible roles. And I have no regrets of any path that I've taken, but what I advise my daughters is to pursue things that give you inner joy. And really find the roles that fulfill you. When you go to work and you're excited, there were certain times in my career when I was in sales at a startup, which is just a roller coaster, where I was utterly miserable and I really didn't see a path out of it. And I would never want to see anybody in that position. And it's all worked out great. There's no need to feel bad for me. They were all life lessons. But I think it's something consciously to think about when you're making your career choices. What are you looking for in this role? Is it really just money and title, or is it something that's going to help you grow personally and fulfill you?
I'm almost there with all of the great wisdom that Alex, Ken, and Sarah have all given us tonight, but I want to give everyone the opportunity to ask their own questions. We have about 10-15 minutes left, and I already see a hand, so go ahead.
Hi, my name's Duncan, former SE, moved into a sales role and actually looking to move back in SE and sales leadership, in SE leadership. Wanted to piggyback on Sarah's comment and what Ken just mentioned. Would like to ask Lizzie and Alex kind of what are your thoughts about having SEs more involved in terms of building that relationship independent of their account managers and account execs, so that it's a separate relationship that you have, you're not kind of tied together when talking to your clients.
Alex, go ahead.
Sure. 150% agree with that, and I think it's great. I think it not only just builds the relationship between the two organizations and not only builds the credibility for the deal that you're looking to do, but I think it also just extends the reach. I often think for account executives, a lot of times I'm kind of asking these questions when we're starting to intake deals in value consulting. Where are we multi-threaded? Where are we, working with the customer? How are we kind of mapping out their organization and building relationships across the organization? There's no reason an account executive should be the only person doing that. I think, to your point earlier, some of the best deals that I've been in, both as an SE and outside of SE, have been places where you can take the CIO to the side and become the trusted advisor to that person, so that when they're in the boardrooms, but we're not, they're able to have the conversation and say, you know what, I think that I trust both the account executive, but I know if I reach out to the SE or if I know I reach out to the CSM or whomever it might be, I can get an answer as well. And that's the kind of company I want to work with. That's the kind of values of an organization that I want to work with. And it helps us show up better for our customers. So 150%.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think to Sarah's point, the necessary condition for me getting involved in a deal is having an AE who knows exactly how to use me. And so exactly as you're describing, pulling me into the CIO conversation and not into the day-to-day user conversation, for example, if I don't need to be there. And so I think that it takes a great partnership to what Sarah was saying earlier about having that internal credibility and those relationships built so that an AE and an SE can collaborate to use the right tools in the right situations. And in that case, I think it's awesome to be involved as deeply as possible, especially in the relationship building. Any other questions? Yeah, Chris.
So, do I need to stand up?
Yeah.
Can we get this spotlight on you?
So you all have shared about your individuality, and Alex, you talked about strengths. You guys have talked about your strengths. How do you assess what your strengths are, and then how do you take that further and apply them to differentiate yourself as an SE? What do you have some advice there?
Yeah, I think my simple gauge on that is when you're doing something and you've had to work really hard to accomplish it, do you feel great at the end, or do you feel exhausted and wow, that was tough? Sometimes tough is good. I mean, it's tough, but I feel like I accomplished something. But if it's tough and man, I never want to do that again, it's probably you don't want to do more of that.
Definitely aligned to that. I think it comes from a place of what do I really enjoy? What gets me up in the morning? I think, Ken, you were talking about your daughters, right? That's similar advice that I've had as well, right? Like, if I get up in the morning or start my laptop and start thinking about, all right, how am I going to build value for this customer today? How am I going to think about modeling something out, right? Like, that's where I was before I became a value consultant, and that's what led me and has, quite frankly, sustained me through starting the value consulting organization at Slack, because that was unclear and a lot of gray area coming into that. So I think it comes from a place of passion, and then you lean in and start applying the actual kind of rigor to it.
Yeah, I agree with what both these gentlemen said. For me, it's a lot of how I feel after something. You know, like when I log off of a demo call or walk out of a customer meeting, like, do I feel really like jazzed and like proud of what I did and like kind of like I'm flying, or am I starting to dissect every area where I misplaced a word or things like that? But I also think you can ask people. I ask my RVPs and my sellers all the time, like what they think that I'm doing well and like what I can do better. And I think with that, one thing just like for my specific brand, I guess, is I really want to be an SE who's known for being able to talk to anyone, whether they're a day-to-day contact or a CEO of an organization. So that's something that I'm working really hard to lean into, because I've always kind of been good at talking to adults. So, you know, we're perfecting that and trying to make that something so that, you know, account executives know that they can bring me into these big meetings and trust me.
Sarah, I love that you are always asking people, what could I have done better? I've been doing that. I've been in my career for more than 30 years. I'm still doing that. And I encourage everybody I work with to do the same thing. Like, we all observe things from each other, and you need to be confident enough to be vulnerable and say, what could I be doing better? Because I want to constantly improve. Love that.
At the very least, it's a good insurance policy. And I'm saying this at the very least, like, it's hard to fire you if you ask all the time what you could be doing better, and they say nothing, you know? Like, so that's just, at least like cover yourself in that way.
Keep those screenshots handy, Sarah.
Yeah. but hopefully you'll get some really good nuggets, and as you build some relationships, people will feel confident to tell you what they really think. And you know, they'll tell you what you're doing well, which feels good.
Absolutely. Any other questions? Yeah, Anthony.
So you guys are all very good in front of people. You're obviously in front of everybody. What tips would you give people who are just getting into the SE role around presenting technology? What are some of the nuances and the things you would advise people to read up on or bear in mind when they're presenting technology and when they're presenting to an audience?
I think that preparation will make you feel a lot more confident. And so, you know, spend a few hours. If it's a demo of a new technology that you're not comfortable with, picking out all of your tabs and your examples. One thing that I've been doing very practically when I'm demoing something new is I will use Zoom's recording feature just in a room with myself, and I will just kind of run through what I want to say. And usually I don't even end up watching the final tape. It's like a little bit different than athletes reviewing their gameplay. It's literally just the pressure of knowing I'm being recorded that makes me sort of, it adds a little bit of legitimacy to like my practice session. And then usually by the time I'm actually doing it live, it's like the 20th time I've done it, and I feel a lot more comfortable. I do think it's also kind of easier in the Zoom era to block out how many people are there if you're a little bit nervous about talking in front of crowds. This is harder. I'm very aware of how many of y'all there are. But you know, Zoom, you can minimize the participant screen. It's just you looking at yourself, which is pretty easy. It like takes off some of the pressure. Sorry, I didn't mean that as like I'm easy to look at. I meant that. I just mean it more as it's.
I was thinking that would be my worst nightmare.
I just mean that it's easier to kind of pretend that it's just you and not the client who's evaluating you.
Maybe I'll go from a kind of hard skills and then soft skills thing. So hard skills, one of the best things that I got when I first started SEing was the Demo to Win. It's a book, it's a kind of methodology for demoing, tell, show, tell, for those in the audience who've seen or been around it. But I thought that was really good in terms of structuring and learning how to structure some of the conversations that I'm having with people so that they follow and track and understand where I'm going with the demonstration or with whatever the discussion is. I still use it a lot in value consulting work, actually. And then maybe soft skills is find a comfortable place, and that kind of serves as two things. One is in front of the audience, right? There's always going to be that one person who's supporting you, or always that one person who, even if they are from the client, they kind of know what it's like to be up in front of somebody, right? I always look for that person who's like nodding like this. I'm just going to come back to you every time. But like that helps me in those moments where I do get a little nervous, because we all get nervous sometimes. Kind of come back to home base, or even demo rituals. Like before a demo, I have a song that I always listen to, right? And just
You're not going to tell us what it is.
This is weird. I'm a big guitar fan. It's a John Mayer song. Excellent guitars. Sorry? not that song. But you know, having that kind of comfort spot or having that ritual that kind of brings you down into the place and brings you down into the space. I'd say those are my two things.
I think Alex is like the Olympic athlete of SE. You see all the Olympic athletes like with their AirPods in right before the run. But I think the advice both Sarah and Alex shared was great. I would say a couple practical things. Whatever speed you're speaking at, slow it down. Make sure you're taking some breaths. I would say critically important, especially when it's virtual Zoom calls, is engage the audience. Check in, ask questions. They're not going to want to speak up. You've got to pull it out of them. It has to be an interactive conversation. And then the final piece is just know your audience. So if it's not a technical audience and you're throwing out acronyms, nothing that you say is going to make any sense. They're going to be stuck on the fact that you just said 5 things that they don't understand. So really think about who you're talking to and how much you need to explain the fundamental technical building blocks.
If I could jump on, especially for us from New York who tend to speak faster. Seriously, slow down a little bit. I remember my first training when I was at Oracle, and you know, Oracle's a bunch of people from across the country, so I got in there and I'm like, yeah, New York, what's up? Crossing here, walking here, all of that. And going, you know, a million miles a minute through my demo, and everybody was like, we didn't get anything you said. And it took me a long time to really recognize that, to your point. So.
I think we have time for one. Oh, it's tough to choose. All right, the person in the center with the sweater.
Hi. So quick question. I was wondering what's, for those who transition from a SE role to a more business-led role, right, not as technical, what was the most challenging thing to move to that role? And I ask because I used to work as an account manager. I work at Cisco, by the way. And I switched to a more technical role, not really, but a specialist. And the reason why I did that was because even though I was earning more money, there was too much pressure on it, and I was literally burned out on that process and had too many responsibilities. So I was wondering if that's just me, or or do you guys feel like there's some challenges there with having more responsibility? Because as an SE, sometimes you work a little bit more on your own, and when you're an account team or leading an account team, you have all these different resources and sometimes a little bit more responsibility. So I was wondering if you felt that that was a challenge.
Yes, 100%. So yeah, some of the most difficult things for me transitioning into sales were the running the business aspect of it, forecasting and being responsible for a quota, and having to be the person who was leading all the meetings and orchestrating all of the resources. It was just a whole new set of skills that I had seen from the SEC, but I hadn't been responsible for personally. And actually some of them, the forecasting I hadn't seen. So I kind of felt like in the SE role, there was inherently pressure. I had to get the demo done, the POC ready, respond to the RFP. There were sometimes very late nights, many of them in a row. But in the sales role, it feels like I've been in 15 years of nonstop pressure of a different kind that never goes away, which I've just embraced. It's what I do now, but it's a very different pressure.
Yeah, maybe speaking to value consulting a little bit. Value consulting is not too far from SE. So a lot of the similar motions that SEs go through, I would go through, which made it actually easier to transition because I felt at home. I think the challenge for me was value consulting at Slack was an entirely new practice. So we were kind of building it from the ground up, and it's really hard to know where to start. So in that, there was a lot of trial, failure, and really just kind of pushing to experiment and understand things. And I think maybe thinking to processing and dealing with some of that pressure, I think it's, you know, having a North Star vision, and then creating clarity around how we're going to get to the North Star vision, but then also not putting too much pressure on yourself that, you know, you're not producing anything. We worked really well in sprints once we figured it out, and then just kind of evolving things little by little as we went. 3 years later, you know, we have a fairly mature value consulting practice that's continuing to grow.
All right, for our last question, I'm going to ask you to do a different type of forecasting. Knowing what you know about your roles so far, your career, what's next for you? Where do you see yourself going next?
You've been at 4 different positions.
That's true. So I would not say this is next for me, but I eventually want to be the chief customer officer of a company. So there's a few steps between where I am right now and there, but I want to be an IC for a few more years to really get to know what it's like to be talking to customers and understanding that dance, working with an account team, driving revenue for the company. I think that'll give me really important insight when then I turn and try and be on an internal sort of management track. So hopefully one day, maybe like 20 years from now, I don't know what the timeline is.
Much sooner.
I'll try and cut that down. But I would love to eventually turn a little bit more inward and be part of revenue strategy management for a tech company.
Sure. I've had an incredible time building a value consulting program, and having seen it, I feel like I can extend a lot of my knowledge and experience to other people. So leadership is kind of in my future where I ultimately want to go, and I'm excited to think about what value is, but then continue to kind of push the envelope for how we deliver it to customers. Right? Can we be more proactive? Can we get more prescriptive? Can we be really sharp in front of customers? Because for Slack, and I'm sure for a lot of products, once the light bulb goes off, that's like the coolest moment, right? So if I can kind of scale that practice and have other people, help other people get that experience, that would just be awesome.
Yeah, I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, so I'm working on that. But I've found I really like working at Amazon. The culture is a good fit for my value system, and I've done the management thing and don't want to do that again. So, like the role I'm in right now, I'm enjoying. One of the nice things about Amazon, there are lots of different roles. I could go work for Amazon.com or Prime Video or something else. So I feel like the opportunities are wide open, and I'm just keeping my ears and my heart open to what looks interesting when I'm ready to move on from this job. And just from a current events perspective, I'm really fascinated by Web 3.0, blockchain, metaverse, not like the video game part of it, but how we're going to conduct business in Web 3.0. So I'm definitely doing some research on that. My customers pulling me into it a little bit, which helps. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on too.
Great. Well, I'm sure you're getting LinkedIn notifications as we speak with everyone, our chief customer officer, the head of value consulting, and then the next Web3 inventors. So, well, thank you so much, you three. It's been so lovely being in conversation with you. And I so appreciate it. Go ahead.
My question is, what do you guys feel like? How do you guys feel like being at first SENY event? Any recommendation for us for next time?
Yeah, where was this when I was an SE? No, this is great. I wish you had 5 times as many people here to network with each other, but I think it's a wonderful event.
Plus to that, I feel like I meet more SEs, and every time I meet an SE, I'm like, wow, you're incredibly smart. So I would love to continue to come to these.
Thanks.
Yeah, I haven't been to an in-person career growth event since college. So just like with COVID and like being in my old career happily or unhappily for a while. So it's sort of amazing where we are now, 2 years later, almost to the day, that we're able to be in a room like this. So really, really special.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well, thank you all so much for being here. We have another full hour in the space. If you want to drink, hang out, have some food, you're very welcome here. And please go meet some new people. So happy to have you. Thanks.